Welcome to the floor sitting series. This is video 1 in the series, and this is a series for exploring how to sit on the floor. If you're not comfortable sitting on the floor, or you're not confident in sitting on the floor for any extended period of time, you may begin by doing this in bed. If you're unable to sit in bed without leaning back against something, or I should just say, if you're unable to sit without leaning back, then this is not the series for you. If there's enough demand, I may create a series exploring how to transition from perceived dependence on leaning back against something to sitting upright with confidence. You'll need to let me know if that's something you need. I'm assuming for this that you are able to sit on the floor or in a bed, if necessary, upright without leaning back. You need not be perfectly comfortable in order to do so. You just need to be able to do it without pushing yourself into injury. We're not going to be sitting for an extended period of time in total stillness, so don't worry about that. That can actually be much more challenging than moving, as you may or may not already know. So what we are going to be doing in this video is we're going to be exploring side bending. There are many ways in which we can move, obviously, which is why we need to do a series of explorations, not just one. So for this exploration, we're going to be exploring side bending. So you're going to come to a seated position, cross-legged. It probably would be best. You could do legs extended in front of you. That's another possibility. It's not my preference. I find much greater stability actually in a cross-legged position. You may sit in any cross-legged position that works for you. We may do an exploration or a series later looking at various cross-legged postures. If you're not familiar with your options, then just do what you are able to do. You probably have at least know of one cross-legged position. And if you're unable to do that with confidence, you may have legs extended. They may be together or they may be separated. Did I cover everything? I think I covered everything. Okay. So we're starting from this position. We're going to remain in this position, but we're going to be moving, if that makes sense. So to begin with, place your hands on the top of the iliac crests. Another way of saying that is put your hands on your waists. So the waist, as I understand it, as I use the term, is synonymous with the soft tissue around the top of the iliac crest. So if you place your hands here, you'll feel that there's bone on either side, and that bone is the pelvis. Now, you may not be clear on what is bone. Sometimes soft tissue can be so chronically tense that it masquerades as bone in our perception of it. So don't assume that you know what's what, but you can get a sense, perhaps, of if you poke gently, you'll notice there's some tissue here that's obviously soft, yielding. If you go up, you'll find there are ribs. If you go down a little bit below the ribs, you'll find that it's very yielding. That's just soft, that's soft tissue. And then as you move lower, you'll notice that it gets firm again. Whether or not you're actually touching bone or not will become clearer, perhaps. But you should notice there's a firmness there that's indicating that you're in the right region, probably. Okay, so we want to have our hands right at the top of the iliac crest so that they're resting. So you take like this. And then, so the thumb is on the back side, fingers are on the front side, and they can just sort of rest like you have two shelves So we want to familiarize ourselves with the pelvis, uh, inwardly and outwardly. We want to clarify our image, our mapping of that. As we're doing this, notice that you can soften and release elsewhere through the body so that the shoulders, for example, can be relaxed. They don't need to be doing this. They can be soft. And you can allow the weight of the arms to actually come all the way down through the arms, through the hands, and come to rest on the tops of the iliac crests. So these iliac crests are the uppermost points of the pelvis. There are two hemipelvises, two sides to the pelvis. And in the back, you can even just trace with your your thumbs or your fingers, you can feel that that bone comes all the way on the back, comes together as the two hemipelvises fuse together with the lower portion of the spine. The lower vertebrae form the sacrum, which is a fusion of those vertebrae, and they are also fused together with the hemipelvises, forming the entire pelvis. Okay, so we're going to bring our hands to the tops of the iliac crests, let them rest there. And I want you to become aware that the pelvis actually forms a bowl of sorts, so that the two hemipelvises wrap underneath and come together also at the pubic bone. They form the pubic bone. So the pelvis includes the pubic bone, so it's wrapping around underneath. And we're actually sitting on the pelvis. So your hands are on top of the uppermost part of the pelvis, and you can notice, if you allow yourself to be sensitive, you can actually feel how your arms are connected from the shoulder all the way down through the elbow, down through the hand, resting on the pelvis. You can feel energetically that weight is transferred down through the arm and hand, down into the iliac crest, down through that bone, all the way transferring down to the ground or the floor or what's underneath you. And there doesn't need to be anything between you and that. Okay, so you don't need to be lifting up, gripping, clenching in the buttocks. You can actually allow for the hands here to help clarify this connection so that you can start to sense correctly how your pelvis can come to rest on the ground, on the floor, on the bed, whatever it is you're sitting on. And start to allow for that to become even, so that the right and left sides are evenly resting. Let the right buttocks and the left buttocks release and soften. The bone is very strong. You're not going to injure yourself by allowing your bones to do their job, which is to support your body. So let them come to rest. And now, continuing to remain aware, and this is important, remaining aware of that pelvis in space so that the pelvis is not shifting. We're going to keep the pelvis where it is, which means the hands are going to remain where they are, and we're going to be aware of that location in space. We're going to bend to the left. So I want you to be aware there are at least two ways that we could bend to the left. Not really. There are at least two ways we could move our torso to the left. One would be to bend. The other would be to lean. So leaning, as I'm using the word here, would mean that I would lift the right side of the pelvis so that the torso remains basically in line, straight, and it just leans. If we go too far, we fall to the side. The other possibility, and the one that I'm inviting us to do, is to bend so that the spine is bending. Each vertebrae is changing its relationship to the other vertebrae. So if I'm upright, the vertebrae are in theory, maybe not in reality, but more or less they're stacked vertically. If I lean, they remain stacked, and I'm shifting the pelvis so that the pelvis moves. What I'm proposing is that we keep the pelvis where it is and we change the relationships of the vertebrae. Now, you don't need to lean as far as I'm leaning. Your leaning may be like this. In fact, your leaning might be like this. Go very slow. Don't exaggerate it. Just as far as you can lean, not lean, bend to the left while keeping the pelvis where it is. Now the hands stay where they are. The hand is going to be very helpful for a couple of things. One is that it's going to help to keep your awareness of that pelvis in space so that it's not moving. And the other is that it's going to give you feedback about what's happening here in the waist, on the side of the rib cage. You can start to feel what? That soft tissue, which maybe wasn't as soft as it could be, but now maybe if you allow it, it becomes softer. You notice it can lengthen. And if you really do this, as I'm suggesting, it's possible, and it's entirely possible for you presently to learn how you can release that unnecessary effort so that this soft tissue softens and lengthens, becomes supple and pleasurable. And what else happens? You can become more aware of the bone. So really become curious and sensitive to what is bone and what is soft tissue. You will feel that the bone is clarified in your awareness. You will feel it with your fingers more clearly. Before it would not be so clear because you were holding unnecessary tension. You can become aware of the bone by learning how to lengthen and soften the soft tissue. So we're going to come to upright. So let's repeat that many times, slowly. How stable can we allow the pelvis to be? So the hand should give you this clarity of that the hand is here. The hand isn't moving up and down. The hand remains. The pelvis is remaining. So something has to change. What's changing? This here is changing. This is lengthening. This is softening. Okay, we'll do that a couple more times to the left. And notice that as you become aware of the possibility of the lengthening and softening, you can feel it here. You can actually feel it under your fingers. This is important to understand. You should be able to sense this. This is not a vague thing that you have to take entirely on faith. You should actually feel this. You should feel the tissue lengthening and softening. If you don't feel that, then you're straining. You're going too far. Then you need to bring it back, and you need to do less. So come to vertical and just explore the smallest movement. And direct your intention so that your intention goes to this area and you become aware of how you're gripping, and you can soften. At first, you don't know how to do this. So don't be frustrated if you don't know how to do it. Trust and know that it really is possible, and that it is possible quickly to develop this skill and for it to become stronger and stronger. Have patience, and it will come quicker. The more that you have patience with it, and the more that you believe me when I say that this is possible for you now. You don't have to wait. This is possible now. It's like you want to just get your foot in the door. Don't try to do it all perfectly. Don't try to be able to do this. Don't try to emulate what you see externally. Feel inwardly so that you can become sensitive to this capacity that you have to direct the intention to soften, to release. And then it becomes a very distinct experience. This is something that you can actually perceive. It's not vague in the least. It's a very distinct, clear thing that I'm talking about, an experience that can be had, that you can have. So if you have doubt about whether you're having the experience, you're not having the experience. It's a very clear, distinct experience of the softening and lengthening, and your ability to direct your intention to do so. So as you lean, that leaning, not leaning, bend. As you bend, that's going to lengthen. Well, it's going to increase it will lengthen. But you then need to direct the intention to soften. Because there's a way that you can do this. This is a long video. You can do this in a way that's like gripping, holding your breath. Or you can do this in a way that is pleasurable, clarifying, in which you can breathe without strain. So if you're holding your breath, if you're gasping, if you're efforting to breathe, then ease up, do less. Let it be a small bend. The larger bend will come more easily as you are clearer on how to lengthen and soften here with the direction of your intention. And let's do that to the other side. So keeping the hands on the tops of the iliac crests, bend to the right so that and keep the pelvis where it is so that the pelvis does not lift. Let this lengthen, let it soften so that you can feel the tissue softening and you can feel the bone getting clearer in your awareness. You can actually feel it with your fingers more clearly. Your fingers will be effortlessly starting to sink into the soft tissue as that soft tissue softens so that it's not all bunched up. So we're doing this many times. And when you're doing this correctly, hate to use the word, sorry, but when you're doing it correctly, this is going to feel so good. So if it doesn't feel good, you're not doing it correctly. And that's good news. It just means that you don't need to do it, don't continue to do it in the same way, open to doing it in a new way. Likely means do less, meaning don't bend as much, and it means do it with more awareness. Make sure that you're breathing, but let the breath be natural. If you are struggling with the breath at all, you're doing too much. You don't need to synchronize the movement with the breath either. In fact, I don't actually think that that's useful. I think it's more useful to discover that the movement can happen independent of the breath, so that you don't come to depend upon sequencing or synchronizing breath with movement. Then your movement can be spontaneous and your breath can be natural. Oh, so as you, I keep meaning to say this and then I forget. So when you are bending and you notice that the tissue is softening and lengthening, maintain that awareness of the softness and lengthening and do not introduce any unnecessary contraction into it as you come back to upright. See that that's possible. This is an important part, because that's when something really shifts in your perception of yourself. When you realize through direct experience that you do not need that tension. You don't need it to do this movement. You thought you did, but you don't. When you can bend without that tension, and then you can come back to upright without that tension, you know for sure that you don't need that tension to do the movement. Then it's not something you have to take on faith. It's an actual experience that you for sure have, and it's embodied. So we're keeping the pelvis where it is. Don't let the pelvis lift. Both of the buttocks are on the floor, and not just the buttocks, but the pelvis itself, the bones. Now let's do something wild and crazy. Let's go all the way to the left, keeping the pelvis where it is, so lengthening on the right side. And then slowly coming to upright without introducing any unnecessary effort or tension, so that the waist remains soft, the bones remain clear, and then to the right. So now we're going from side to side. Remember not to strain, so please, if it becomes uncomfortable or strenuous, then just ease up. Don't do so much. Rest if you need to. But if it's possible, find the rest more deeply in this movement. So that doesn't mean that it's better to keep moving. It just means that if you can explore finding that rest in the movement, then that would be really nice. And if that's not appropriate for you right now, then don't push, just rest. But it can be such that you can find that ease and rest in the movement, so that the movement is actually supportive of that ease and rest. The more you move, the clearer the ease and rest becomes, so that you are able to more rapidly recognize the unnecessary effort to get clearer and clearer on the bones. And I hope that you're discovering the great ease, suppleness, and pleasure that's possible in this movement. I certainly am. This is fantastic. I mean, this is so pleasurable. I could do this for a long time. Every time I do it, it gets better and better. My pelvis is so much clearer in my awareness now than it was when I first started. And importantly, I can feel it all the way up the spine. So let the whole side of the body, the whole back of the body, the whole front of the body, the whole body be supple and soft and pleasurable, so that this is like being a willow swaying. And you can feel your pelvis where it touches the ground or the floor or the bed or whatever you're on, and that's your root. You don't lose the root, because the root is your connection to the support, to the nourishment. That's your anchor. That's what allows you to sway in this fluid, pleasurable way. And you might start to notice that you can release further and further down. Who knew that there was so much unnecessary effort being held in the pelvis? All the way down into the thighs. You might notice all that gripping and shortening and lack of clarity starts to dissolve. Maybe you start to feel your lower abdomen more clearly. Well, I hope this has been helpful to you, and look forward to your feedback. And then I'm going to create more videos in this series soon. Okay, take care. Bye for now.